Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. I'm super excited to be here with you today to share how to do some stained glass see-through panels. So the first thing you want to do is grab a die. The easiest way to do this technique is with a full A2 sized card panel die. However, you can use any die you might have on hand. I'll show you how to use a smaller one later on in this video. You're going to want to cut that die about 4 times from some heavyweight white cardstock. Mine is 110 pounds here, so it's pretty thick. I've got 4 different panels here, all cut out, ready to go. I also have a piece of acetate that is slightly smaller than my panel itself, but I want to make sure that it covers up all of those holes that the die is leaving in the panels. I also have my A2 size card base. This is a side folding card base. And this is going to work with my panels here. So it's the same size as my panels that I've got going on. I've got everything ready to go, but to be able to see through the entire card, I need to get rid of the front of my card base. So I measured how much of an overhang I could have with the die I have. It's about 1/4 of an inch. So I'll leave 1/4 of an inch on the front of the panel, but the rest of that I'm going to cut off. Now I'll save that piece of cardstock for another time, but here's what my card base looks like now. I've got 1/4 of an inch on the left-hand side there. The rest is open. I'll go ahead and place a piece of very strong adhesive right there on that little flap that's overhanging on the front. This is going to hold my first panel. Now I'm going to go ahead and place it on the inside of the flap on the underneath part. So then I'll place my panel down, line it up with my card front, and then push that flap over on top of the panel. That way there is no gap on the inside. It looks as though the front panel and the back panel of this card base are one and the same. You can't see that little piece that I've cut. It's going to be sandwiched in between 2 more dies. Now my card base is done, it's ready to go. The next step is to seal up all those holes. That's where the acetate comes into play. The first thing you want to do is get your base ready with some adhesive. I'm using score tape here, and I'm just putting a lot around the butterflies themselves to make sure that the score tape is going to be nice and secure. It's not going to bubble up, it's not going to raise up or anything like that. I just want it nice and secure against those holes of the butterflies. You want to make sure that your acetate is large enough to cover the entire area that your die cuts out. So here I'm just using a nice rectangle. You could cut off the bottom portion if you wanted, you really don't need it. But go ahead and make sure that you get all of those holes covered with that plastic. I'm going to go ahead and place that right down over the top of the adhesive. Now that it's sealed up, we can move on to the next step of this, which is creating little wells for our medium to go into. Now that's why we cut so many different pieces of this die. I'm going to go ahead and use some liquid glue now. You want this nice and secure so no medium is going to seep through the 2 layers here. But use quite a bit of liquid adhesive, or you can use your score tape again and layer up 2 of these dies right on top of each other to create some dimension. I am using 110 pound weight cardstock here. That is going to give me a thicker result. If you're using thinner cardstock, you might want to do 3, maybe even 4 layers to create a nice little well. Now, once I have those 2 layered up together, I'm going to place some adhesive on the back of that and layer those over the top of the acetate layer. Now I've got my card base on the bottom, my acetate over that, making sure I cover all of those openings. Then on top of that, I've got my 2 layers of cardstock. Again, make sure that you have enough adhesive. If any squishes out on the sides, I like to use my little quick sticks tool to just wipe it up quickly, and then I don't have any adhesive marks. Now here's where the magic happens. I'm going to use some gel medium. You want this in gloss. You can use the matte. It's going to give you a more frosted look if you use that. The gloss is going to give you a completely transparent see-through element. So just keep that in mind whenever you're looking for a gel medium. Matte is going to give you a frosted look. The gloss is going to give you completely transparent. I'm going to put 3 dollops of this just on a piece of plastic here. You can use whatever you have on hand, mixing tray, whatever you have, but you want to put out however many colors you're going to use. Now you could use just plain gel medium and get a nice clear result, but I'm going to tint these a little bit. To do that, you want a water-based ink. I'm using my Catherine Pooler inks, but you can use Distress inks, you can use Tailored Expressions inks, you can use Gina K inks, Simon Says stamp inks, whatever water-based ink. You can even use some watercolors, liquid watercolors. You could also use reinkers. So it really is whatever you have on hand, it can work for you. Just make sure it's a water-based substance. Now once I squish some of that ink down, I'm going to mix that up into each one of the gel mediums. Then it's time to start filling in these little holes. I'm starting off with the blue, and I'm just going to fill in each one of these little butterflies with some of that medium, and then using my palette knife, I'm going to scrape it off so it's nice and flat. I just like to turn the palette knife on its side and go right over that hole. Now, whenever you're filling these up, you want to make sure you get into all the little nooks and crannies. So take your time. It's going to get a little messy. That's okay. We're going to put another layer of cardstock over this. So it's going to look like a hot mess. You're going to have ink everywhere. You're going to have this gel medium left over on some of these. That's okay. It's going to all be cleaned up. Now, you're not going to get every last bit of this gel medium up, but you do not want any huge lumps or bumps. You want this as flat as possible. It is going to dye the paper a little bit. That's fine. Just make sure you get the majority of that gel medium up. Scrape as much away as you can. You also want to make sure that you get these areas that you're filling in nice and flat. You don't want any huge curves or anything like that inside of the butterflies themselves. So just make sure you're scraping straight across. The palette knife really helps in that. If you don't have palette knives, you can also use an old credit card or gift card. Some hard plastic is really what you want here. So I'm using 3 colors here. You can use as many or as little as you want. It would definitely be a lot easier just to fill these in all with one color, but I wanted an array of colors, so I chose 3 and filled them all in equally around the card base. I let this dry overnight. This technique takes some time. It's not going to dry in just a few hours. I like to let mine sit overnight. It really does take a while because you're putting such a thick layer of medium in. But once that dries, you've got this gorgeous transparent butterflies that you can see through. It is such a neat technique and so well worth the effort and time it takes. Now, we still have that little bit of a mess on our top layer, so we're going to cover that up with our last die cut that we made. Now on this die cut, I did add a little bit of stenciling with a cloud die and some more Catherine Pooler inks. I just did a very, very simple technique. I'll apply some liquid glue over the back of that and place that right over the top. This will stick perfectly down even over that medium that's already on there. Then you can add your sentiment. I added a few jewels around mine and this card was ready to go. And you can see these are completely see-through. You can see my fingers through the card itself. It's so neat and such a cool look. There you can see holding it up to the glass. You can see the light through it. I absolutely love this. Now on my first card, I used a full A2 size panel, so it's really easy to line up. But you can use regular dies. What I like to do is just take all of my card panels, cut them down to A2 size. Then I'll go ahead and line up my die in my die cutting machine with 2 of those panels. Now it's going to cut through the first layer, but your back panel is going to get the indentation of the die. You can go ahead and place that die right back into that indentation and run that through your die cutting machine again with that top layer on top. Then I put the other layer underneath, another layer underneath, and I just keep cutting that way even with my card base. I just open up my card base so the back of it's hanging out. It's not going to get any cutting done on it. And then I'll go ahead and do the same technique like I did on the first one. Now I do like to put a piece of computer paper over the top just so it doesn't get any of those weird cut marks in the paper that you sometimes get whenever you get a lot of pressure going on in your die cut machine. But it's super easy to do. If anything's off, all you need to do is go ahead and cut it down slightly on the sides. You're still going to get those layers in between. I like to use a craft knife to do that, which I'll show you later on. So again, the first thing I did was go ahead and put down the acetate over the front of the card base. That's going to give me that nice flat background that I need, and none of my gel medium is going to fall out through the back that way. Then I layered up 2 of my panels right on top of each other and set those aside to dry. Now this die actually has a little bit of a stained glass feel, I guess you could say. You could leave just the opening of the leaf itself, but I'm actually going to inlay this die right back inside of the opening itself. Now I went ahead and layered up 2 of those dies, and then I'll inlay those right inside my 2 that I've layered up on top of the card base. I'm going to save that third die, and I'll show you what I did with that later on as well. Now again, you want to use your gloss gel medium. If you want the transparent look, if you want a frosted look, use the matte gel medium. And I'll mix it with a little bit of a dye-based ink. I'm using eucalyptus ink from Catherine Pooler. Again, there are lots of different options, or you can leave it completely transparent. Then I'll just fill in all of those little areas, making sure I get into all the nooks and crannies, and I'm going to make sure that I wipe away the majority of the excess and make sure there are no lumps and bumps around it so I can go ahead and have a nice flat surface to glue on my top layer. But once it dries overnight, I've got this completely transparent set of leaves that you can see through all the way to the inside of the card. Such a neat thing to do. Now it's time to add our extra layer right on top to cover up all of our mess on the inside. Make sure it's nice and lined up. You can cut this top layer a little bit bigger to make sure you have that extra slack around the side, and then just use your scissors to trim it up later on once you get it positioned exactly right. Now to make this look like true stained glass, I took that inside leaf and covered it with a little bit of liquid platinum embossing powder. You could use a gold or a silver embossing powder and it would be gorgeous. I did a couple layers of embossing powder. Then I inlaid it right into the top for that true stained glass look. This one is probably my favorite. It's super simple. I just added a thinking of you sentiment across the top, but again, you don't need much because you have that see-through element, which is really what the card is all about. But on this one, I love the look of that embossing powder. I really think this one looks the most like stained glass with that extra added step. Now on this card, I actually left the gel medium nice and clear, but I added some glitter to it, which is a fun addition you can do. But before I added anything on the inside, I did a little stamping. So there I have that see-through element, which it looks like the stamp is inside, but when you open the card, it's actually on the inside of the card. So that's another fun thing you can do. You can stamp on the inside of the card and have that see-through element to where you can see through to that stamp. There's a closer look at the front of the card, and then finally on this one, I added a die cut on the inside of the card. So I used a rainbow die, saved the pieces from that, and inlaid them through that opening to the inside of the card. Again, I added a little bit of glitter to that gel medium, so it's a nice glittery rainbow now. You can still see the rainbow on the outside of the card, but it's also on the inside, again with that see-through element. So a lot of different ways you can customize this technique to fit you and your card making style, and a lot of different additives you can add. Inks, you can add glitter, you could even add some snow, fake snow if you wanted to. So it's a lot of fun to play around with. I hope you guys enjoyed this technique, and I can't wait to see all the different ways you guys find to use this in your card making. Happy crafting, everyone!